All right. There are like two names on this slide, and it's because Johan, who is not here, actually helped me a lot to create the slides, especially the Indonesian part, and so I just wanted to acknowledge his help on this presentation. So I'm Kenji Baheux. I'm a product manager. I work on Chrome, mostly on making things a lot faster or reliably, as it's being said. And so I want to talk to you about how the web looks like in different countries. I'm not going to talk about the whole world because that won't fit into 30 minutes, but I'm just going to focus on a few countries. But before I do, I want to share a little bit of background about myself. And so, as you may have noticed, I actually have a Japanese name, and maybe as you can tell, I have a French accent. It's just because my father likes a lot Japan, and so I decided to pick a Japanese name, because his plan was, if I name my son with a Japanese name, he's probably going to pick an interest in the country and make his life in Japan, so I can come more often to this country. And it actually just worked out this way. Because I went to Japan the first time in around 2000. I did a bunch of university research, and then I eventually joined Sharp Electronics. And so I was in the midst of this very interesting time in Japan where there was a lot of innovation about feature phone, very fancy things, like iMode, as I said yesterday, pushing the limit of what you can do on a very low spec device. And it just keeps on and on and on. And you can see at the top, there is some kind of smartwatch. And so I feel that I've seen the future in some sense. It was a bit geeky and whatever, but there's this famous quote that Steve Jobs actually used, which is Picasso said that good artists copy and great artists steal, which is you look at something, what is happening elsewhere, and you make it your own. You refine the idea. And I think this is what happened eventually around the world. A lot of the innovation that you see here are things that we are still experiencing today in refined better ways. And so my hope is that by having you look at what's happening around the world, you might pick up on some interesting innovation that you would not think about in other ways. And so we'll see how that goes. So the plan is to talk about mostly three countries: India, Indonesia, and Japan, and in 30 minutes. And so that's going to be very tough. And so it's probably going to be very wide and shallow, and hopefully that helps you pick you some interest on the topic and want to explore more and maybe talk with me afterwards. All right, let's talk about the different opportunities that we have. So this is Indonesia. A lot of people, as you can see on the picture. In terms of people who have access to the internet, what I did is I looked at the number of broadband subscriber along two things, fixed connection at home, typically, and mobile connection. So the first thing you will notice is that this market is very much a mobile market. A lot of users just keep the whole fixed connection and just go for a mobile device and mobile connection. It's only 32% penetration in terms of number of internet users compared to the population. But it's already number 7 in terms of number of users who have access to the internet. And population-wise, it's the fourth most populated country in the world. So there's a lot of potential for growth. And so it's going to be very interesting how that goes. It's a very interesting market. This is Japan. And this is quite different because Japan has been connected for a long time, and they have a lot of users using laptops and things like that. In terms of penetration, it's very high. It's 91%. It's the number 5 countries in terms of number of people who have access to the net. And in terms of population, it's only 11, and it's going to decline, as you know. But it's still a very interesting market driven, trying to drive innovation and things like that. And finally, India. So this one is similar to Indonesia in the sense that it is very much a mobile market. 500 million users using the internet through their mobile device. In fact, they just keep the whole, buying a laptop is not something that people do. They would prefer to buy a mobile device, and we'll see why that is the case. It's also still very much just the beginning. It's only 34% of penetration. It's already number 2 in terms of number of users after China. And population-wise, it's the number 2 country, right? So a very interesting market. All right, so we do have a lot of users. How about like their ability to access the internet? And first and foremost, like the quality of the mobile connection. And so it's kind of like asking ourselves, is the mobile connection gangster or not? All right, so this is the cost of data in 2016 for different countries. So it doesn't really tell you much, like is it expensive or not? How does that compare to what people are familiar with? And so one thing you can do is look in terms of like power purchase parity. And so it's this idea of like trying to find, okay, what's the value of this particular currency in a different country? And so that gives you an idea of like how expensive that is. The thing it doesn't say is, if you look at this, it's kind of like roughly in the same ballpark, and so maybe it's cheap enough in 2016. But the fact is, this is actually very expensive. And the way to find out about that is to compare to how much percentage of the gross national income per capita, which gives you a rough idea of the average income that people have over there. And at the time, on a yearly basis, it's about 3 to 2% for those two countries, whereas in the US and France, it's like 1/10 of that, right? And so not only the income that people have is like lower, but it's a higher fraction of their income. And so that is very expensive, right? And then in September 2016, there was this announcement. Jio was a new carrier in India. And their chairman was like, I'm going to fix this. This is not acceptable. And so he announced some very aggressive plan. Essentially what it is was free domestic call forever for people who sign up within like the certain period of time. And then he also had a welcome pack. If you signed up within the 3 next months, you would have unlimited access to all their like Jio services, but also 4 gigabytes a day for free for 3 months. So that is like game-changing, right? And let's look at what happened after that in terms of like pricing today. So today, roughly 2018, 2019, the price of 1 gigabyte is only 0.15% of the GNI. And it's the cheapest mobile plan that you can see, you can have worldwide. So it is very, very much affordable. It might not be affordable for everyone yet, because it's still like on average, but it's really affordable for most people that we talked to when we went there. Indonesia is kind of similar. It's slightly higher, but it's still affordable for most people. All right, so affordability is good, but what about the speed? The #1 country per the Open Signal research in May is Korea, with 52.4 megabit per second. And then just picked up this one. Netherlands is actually doing pretty well. It's #5. Japan, you would think that it's like one of those countries where everything is super fast. It's not really that fast compared to Korea. It's like a #10. And then sadly, okay, for Indonesia and India, it's actually a bit like at the bottom of the pile. It's only 7 megabit per second. And so people, when we go there, they know it's like marketed as 4G, but tend to think it's like 4G, but it's actually like 3G most of the time. All right. And we also see that through the Chrome UX matrix report that we have. This is the effective mobile connection for different countries. And so you can see that the effective 4G is only half of the time true. Most of the time it's 3G and maybe worse. Indonesia is roughly similar. France is still like, there's still room to improve things. Japan is doing pretty well, right? And Netherlands is like killing it. I don't know if there is like a country that does better than that. All right. The other thing that's important to note is that there are a lot of users, as I've said before. And so depending on the time of the day, the speed of the connection is going to change a lot. It might be too congested and whatnot. And so if you really want to like download a whole bunch of things, you have to wake up very early in the morning. Otherwise, you are going to have a bad time during your commute and whatnot. And so when we looked at this, we found out that maybe having API where you can like proactively prefetch content ahead of time based on your engagement with website could be interesting, so that you can offset data usage when it's fast and whatnot. Like data also, you would think that even in Japan it's not an issue, but actually this is very interesting. What this shows is that this is like for every month, it shows something like you can see there is like an interesting pattern, and it's the number of page load per user on a device capable of 4G. And you can see that as the months goes by, this number goes down, right? And you might wonder why that is the case. And this next graph kind of like explains what's going on. This is the page load time for devices capable of 4G in Japan, and you can see that as the month goes by, it like keeps increasing, and then it goes back down. And what's happening is that most users actually have a very like unlimited plan. Most of them have like 3 GB, right? And after that, you can still use the net, but it's going to be very slow. And so people just don't bother anymore. Like me personally, I have a 6 GB plan, and I've been like in that situation where at the end of the month I was like throttled, and I didn't feel like using the web at all anymore. And this morning I checked how many gigabytes I used. I'm about 5 GB on my mobile plan, and about 50 GB on Wi-Fi. And so you can imagine that for people who don't have a laptop and they only use their mobile device, like the data quota is super important. The other thing that goes on in some countries like India is that sometimes the internet is being shut down for various reasons. It could be to limit access to like chat apps to avoid having people like go together and manifest and things like that. And there are like places in India where the internet's been down like for months. So that's also something you need to be aware of. Like sometimes the connection is not readable just because the internet is like just off. All right. Okay, I thought like maybe we should do like a quiz about the next thing. So let's see how that goes. So this graph shows the user interest spreading rapidly, but only in specific markets. All right? It's an app. It has 1 billion users, maybe even more than that, if you believe all the stats that are available. Something is caring. It works offline. And in fact, that's the whole point of that app. Any idea what it is? No? No one? It's a tough one. Okay. It's an app called Share It. And the whole point of that app is to share files offline with your nearby friend. It's very popular in India and other countries like that, where the connection is maybe not always available. Maybe back in the days it was too expensive to use it. And so if you had like the latest like video of the famous artist, you would just share it through that app with your friend. And actually, I saw this like come up in my feed last week. Opera Mini is now shipping with an offline sharing feature for nearby friends. So it is very trendy. And when we work on like web packaging, we feel that this could enable use case like that. Like if you have the app, it's already like contained in a package, you could share it with your friend nearby. And so we are excited by that. Also, it can speed up loading because if you already have all the resources you need to have something like ready to go on your device, that you don't need to care too much about the connection anymore. You can have a very interesting like discovery experience where you have a feed of interesting apps or content that are ready to go. And you can even make those things enticing. You can have like a game that shows the gameplay loop. And then when you click on it, it just launches instantly and seamlessly. So I'm excited about that with web packaging and portals and other APIs like that. Okay, let's talk about the device landscape. So we actually went to India. I've yet to go to Indonesia. I'm planning to do that after in November. And so what we did is we went shopping for like devices to get a feel of like what's available. And we quickly realized that there were a lot of like brands that we had no idea about. Like for instance, this device series is made by Oppo, which I think is a Chinese brand from a different like OEM. And so some very interesting things happening there. And then the other one is those like feature phones, very popular in markets like India. I think there is about 100 million devices like that sold across the whole world. There is 1.5 billion feature phone already still in use today. So there is still a lot of like potential for those like feature phone devices that are actually like pretty close to being as good as a smartphone in terms of what you can do on it. They have like apps. KaiOS is built on web tech. And so that is very exciting to see. So in terms of device landscape, it's essentially a lot of like Android devices and KaiOS devices. In terms of like what kind of device you can see, it's mostly at the low end of the spectrum. So for instance, this one is the most popular smartphone you can see in India. It's a model that only has 1 GB of RAM. There is like an update in 2018 with, I think, 3 or 4 GB. Storage-wise, it's very limited. It only has 8 GB. And yeah, it kind of like lags behind in terms of like what version of Android is supported. KaiOS device, there are about 70 to 90 million of those in India. It's a very low-end device. It only has one half of a gig. But the killer thing is that it is mostly free. Like if you sign up with Geo, you would get this device for free as long as you are willing to pay a tiny fee for the mobile plan for, I don't know, a couple of years and things like that. The other thing we notice is that because the storage is like very small, all those devices come with a micro SD card. And you can buy a micro SD card. And the interesting thing is that some of them come preloaded with content. So this one has the YouTube Go app, but not just the app. It also has like content. So that was very interesting to see. The other thing that people do when you buy a device, the clerk might like load up your device with apps on the side. So that was interesting and a bit scary, to be honest. Okay, and then on my way back home, I bought the latest like low-end devices. And so there's this G2 version 2018 and a G6 Plus from Samsung. And it's like 2 GB of RAM, a bit more storage, a Snapdragon 425, and then same thing roughly for the G6 Plus with more RAM and more storage, but same CPU. And the price is very like affordable. Okay, and then the question is like, okay, those low-end devices that constitute the bulk of what people use in this market, are they gangster or not? All right. So this is like a benchmark of like the different like CPU that are available today on different devices. So you have the very high-end, like typically iOS devices or like the top end of Galaxy devices. And you can see that every year, like things are getting like higher and higher for those ones. But then if you look at the budget one, it's like it's like very like, there is like a lot of gaps, right? And then at the very low end, the green one, there's this Nokia 2 device, which is like just roughly in the ballpark of like 2014, like it's like 5 years ago. And then the 2 devices I bought, those ones actually are way, 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 way down there, right? So like gigabyte of RAM is one thing, but the CPU that you get on those low-end devices is like very limited. And it's not the fault of the OEM, right? They want to hit a target point, and so they are going to find ways to make that happen, and typically they would like cut down on the things that people don't necessarily understand. So the device is not gangster, but at least it gives the opportunity for users to access the web, so that's good about it. And it's our job to make sure that the experience that we create can scale through the whole gamut of devices. All right. Indonesia is roughly similar. It's a lot of like sub $200 devices, so same picture. The other thing we did is we talked to different users, especially users who were like considering buying a smartphone or already had a low-end smartphone to try to understand what is the motivation and things like that. So a couple of things we learned. First of all is that they don't have the same background that we do. Like, I don't know about you, but I've grown up with the internet, right? I was using the internet on my like beige IBM Pentium machine, right? And so I know what the web is, what it is for, whereas those users, for most of them, it's the first time that they come online, and so they have no expectation whatsoever about the web. They buy a device, and whatever is on the screen is what they are going to try first. right? And so they hear from their friends about apps like WhatsApp and things like that. Yeah, so it's good to know that they don't understand like things like tab and all of that URL. None of that makes sense. The motivating factor for most of those users were things like they wanted to keep in touch with their family and friends or their kids as they go study in different cities, for instance. The other thing was a desire to learn, and so having access to information. The school also is investing in websites and things like that. So all of that were the primary motivating factors. The other thing that goes on is that most of these users can afford to buy one device, and that device gets shared for the whole family, right? So that's also important to note. As I said, storage is a big concern. It's very limited, and so people do micromanage everything. And so when we talk to partners, developers, and so on, their main concern is to reduce the amount of storage that their app use so that they stay below the radar and don't get evicted, right? So that's a big concern for developers over there. The last one is, in terms of use case, it's really about being more independent, trying to improve your livelihood, helping your kids grow and learn and have the best option available for them to have a better future. So those were the main things. In terms of discovery, they were using search, YouTube. There is a real appetite for videos for literacy reasons. I think literacy rate in India is about 74%. So there is that. And there is also a lot of language issue. A lot of content available in English is not really accessible for a lot of users over there. And so when we talk to partners, they wanted to double down on content that is written in a language that people over there can understand. And India has a lot of different languages. Okay, yeah, that's the other one is definitely language, reading, input, all of that is very hard for most users. Okay, let's look at how the web is used over there. So there are many ways we could look at it, but I felt it would be interesting to do this thing that Johan did, which is compare the site that people only access within those countries versus the website that everyone uses across the whole world. So if you look at Indonesia, you can see that the local origin, the set of sites that are only used within Indonesia, is much higher than the set of websites that people tend to use across the whole world. So that is indicative of a very vibrant ecosystem of developers over there that build things for the local users. So that's really good to see. India is kind of interesting because you would expect a similar picture, but it's still roughly half and half. And the reason for that is that for a long time, the devices, the mobile data plan, all of that was not really affordable. And so the audience was kind of the elite, people who can read and speak English. And so that's what you are seeing here. But the partners we talk to really want to, they feel that the market is already tapped out. And so they want to move on for local languages and trying to improve the local origin situation. And at the extreme, I think this should look like something like this. This is Japan. It's roughly only local stuff, right? And for good reasons, right? The Japanese language is very specific, right? It doesn't look like anything like English, right? And so there is a preference for things that are built for the local language and for the local needs. All right. And you can see that Japan totally kills it in terms of number of local websites. India is still, it's pretty high, but I would expect to surpass Japan at some point. And Indonesia might be roughly in between, I would say. All right. Now, if we look at what kind of tech is being used over there, is there any anything specific to those markets that doesn't exist here? Those kind of questions. And if we just look at the mobile local origin, it will give us an idea of what is being used. I think this was mentioned yesterday. Henry mentioned that jQuery is the #1 most popular framework. It is true for all markets. So you have in blue India, and in red Indonesia. Yellow is Japan, and then green is US. So you can see jQuery, Bootstrap, jQuery Migrate, WordPress, jQuery UI, Modernizer, Microsoft ASP.NET. And then React, the new hotness is still not quite there, right? and then a bunch of things like animate.css, lightbox. Okay. All right, so with all of that, is the user experience going to be good or not? And so one way to look at it is essentially like Lighthouse. As was mentioned yesterday, the median Lighthouse score is around 41. And you can see that Japan, India, Indonesia are actually doing better than the median score, right? And unlike, let's say, a country like Australia, like they are doing pretty well on that basis. The downside of Lighthouse is that it is a lab measurement, and so it doesn't necessarily reflect the situation in the countries that people experience those websites. Okay. And so if we look at the actual user data from Chrome UX metrics, this is just showing the first contentful paint for different countries. You can see that the picture looks very different, right? On the previous slide, like Indonesia was actually much faster than Japan, for instance. But in reality, it's not the case, right? The opposite is true. And the same for India. And essentially, this is because of a combination of low-end devices and also a connection that is not always fast or sometimes not readable. And so that does explain a lot of like those issues. Okay. So in short, like we got a lot of things to make go gangster, and so we have a lot of work to do, especially on finding ways to avoid being too reliant on a network connection. Like I think it's a bad idea to wait until the last minute to load something. I think like loading ahead of time through things like web packaging and all of that not only can improve discovery, but also the reliability of the user experience. And those things not only make sense for markets like those, but if you think about it, even for markets like Japan, US, and all of that, there are many reasons why an instant, reliable experience is something that people have come to expect based on the kind of experience that they have through native apps. And so there are a set of things we could do that will improve the user experience for users over there that will also help our users in like more common markets. And obviously there is still a lot more things to learn. It will be interesting to see what kind of innovation those countries come up with, because they have very unique challenges. I didn't mention it in the talk, but like in terms of like payments, a lot of users over there don't have a bank account. And so there is this question of, okay, how do I pay for goods on an e-commerce website? And so for a long time, people were paying when they were receiving the good. The good would be delivered to them and they would pay on delivery, which is something that maybe people did back in the days, but not so much anymore. And so there is a whole set of like things that could be done better for those markets as well. In Japan, interesting enough, there is a resurgence of payments through QR code, which was a thing back in the days, didn't work out, so it would be interesting to see why this time around it will change. All right. I used this like picture which I took in India because I felt it was funny to see that someone had a website-looking email address. But actually, thinking about it, like what I did is essentially a bus tour, right? This idea of like, okay, let's do a quick overview of like different markets. So I hope I didn't like portray the countries in like odd ways. It's not meant this way. It's meant more to pique your curiosity and like trying to have you think about like what else you could do. Maybe you're a framework author, you want to care about low-end devices, you want to make sure that when people use your framework, the user experience that they are going to build is going to scale across the gamut of across the gamut of devices. And so hopefully this is like interesting enough for you to think about what are the ways you could take those opportunities in mind when you build something or create something. It could also be like just documentation, like making documentation available in more languages could also help. And with that, I'm done. Thank you.